And okay, so I can see the participants are coming in now. Good afternoon, everyone. We'll start proceedings shortly. I had some technical difficulties, which means I've only just arrived, but the panel have been on the line longer than I have. So I hope everything's okay with the panel in order to proceed. We've got, yeah, I can see participants now getting to the numbers that we were expecting. So good afternoon, everyone. A very, very warm welcome to the inaugural virtual coffee house, which is starting a series whereby instead of a seminar giving, I guess, just information to you, this is going to be a discursive event, hopefully lifting the lid on a really diverse range of experiences with SQE. So hopefully everyone has a coffee, virtual or otherwise, and the format the format for today is that we'll be here for a little under an hour, and our panel will have some opening comments. I'll introduce them in turn, and then we'll have a good kind of 20-30 minutes or maybe 25 minutes for Q&A. The event's being recorded, subject to any technical issues and editing. If there are technical issues or there's an editing issue, I will record a little digest of what was discussed, and for the purposes of putting that on our Dixon Poon School of Law Keats pages. Those are our internal pages that students can access. So on the subject of students, so that our panel know who we're talking to today, and there's been a lot of requests for the recorded element of this, so just be aware that we're talking to future people as well, panelists. We have LLB programs, LLM programs, and MSc programs, which includes what's called a PGDL, postgraduate diploma in law and professional practice. So the event's been hosted by me as a Professional Law Institute member. So the PLI is currently running a PGDL and an MSc in law and professional practice, and we've just welcomed our third cohort. So I am going to hand over to Chris to start the opening comments. Chris Howard is University Partnerships Director at BARBRI. BARBRI is an institution that King's have a partnership agreement with. He's also Vice Chair of the International Bar Association's Future of Legal Practice Commission. Chris, over to you, please, for your time in introductory remarks about addressing the question, what is the SQE really like, and what is your experiential background with SQE? Thanks very much.
Thanks, Lloyd. Hopefully you can hear me okay. If anybody can't hear me at any point, Lloyd, just shout and please tell me. So it's great to meet you all today. As Lloyd said, I'm University Partnerships Director at BARBRI Global. First of all, just to tell you who BARBRI are, in case some of you aren't aware, BARBRI are a leading training organisation for all forms of licensure in terms of solicitor practice and US bar. We started in the United States around about 55 years ago, and we've been training individuals to take all of the different state US bar exams since then. When the SQE came to the UK, that's when BARBRI took its operation and brought it to the UK because of our established expertise in licensure preparation. And by licensure, I mean, again, state exams for qualification. So we came to the UK to teach to the SQE. We started off teaching to the Qualified Lawyers Transfer Test, which was the kind of precursor in some ways to the SQE, and now we teach to the Solicitors Qualifying Exam. In terms of my relationship with King's, I was part of the team that set up the MSc Law and Professional Practice and the PG DIP, which Lloyd mentioned. And so it's a real pleasure always to come back to King's and talk to the students on the programme, which I had some involvement in. And when we created the MSc, that's when King's entered into its partnership with BARBRI, and that persists today. As you probably know, as students at King's College London, As part of each program, you get access to discounts on SQE1 preparation and then the alumni discount on SQE2 preparation with BARBRI. So do speak to Lloyd after today about how that works, if that's of interest to you. So to zone in then on SQE and my kind of reflections on it, having been involved both as part of King's and now as part of BARBRI. I think the SQE has brought a sea change to legal education in the UK. It's made law schools look at themselves and consider their role as part of a student's journey towards qualification. And I think King's have done a really good job in taking that opportunity and embracing it and looking at ways they could provide in different ways. In terms of the test itself, and I'm sure others will echo this, as you know, SQE is a two-stage test set by the Solicitors Regulation Authority, but administered by Kaplan, another training organisation who in the UK are now the examining board for SQE. The SQE is in two parts, and if you want to qualify as a solicitor, you have to complete both parts and you have to complete them in sequence. So you can't undertake SQE2 until you've undertaken SQE1 successfully. And in terms of what SQE1 demands of you, this is really what I wanted to focus on. And I've been a bit cheeky here because I've spoken to one of my learning teams. So at BARBRI, we are an online provider of education for the SQE. We provide courses that are flexible and adaptable around individuals' other activities and other commitments. But behind our learning technology, there's also a whole bank of learning coaches who provide support to students throughout their experience. In terms of those learning coaches, I spoke to one of them and said, you know, what would be your top tips? How would you characterize the SQE and how would you prepare for that? I've got a bit of background noise here, by the way. I'm sitting in our cafe, so if anybody, if you can't hear me, then just shout Lloyd, and I'll get the others to quiet down, but hopefully it's not too bad. So yeah, top tips for SQE. Well, SQE1 is a knowledge test. It's a 2-day intensive multi-choice question test. Well, I prefer to use the term single best answer question because that's what they are. They're questions that ask you to see and differentiate answers which are similar, have some elements of correctness, but ultimately are one of them is the predominantly correct answer. I think the things that challenge students the most about this test is its length. It's 2 days long, broken into 2 or 4 2.5-hour sessions. It requires you to answer questions quickly and in terms of subject area, kind of out of sequence. And I think that's perhaps the biggest challenge. And what I mean by out of sequence is not in a logical kind of topic order. So you need to prepare for that. And obviously that's why we've created our own preparation programs. And our preparation programs really do two things. They provide you with the knowledge. So they systematically teach the knowledge required for SQE1, but they also, perhaps more importantly, provide you with the technique. One of the things that when I was speaking to the learning coach, she said was that one thing students find difficult to cope with is the idea that they will get questions wrong and that they need to prepare themselves for the fact that it's almost impossible to get an 100% mark in the SQE. The average passing mark for SQE is around about 55%. And we encourage students to aim for about 65 or 70%, but you have to acknowledge that out of those, and by the way, there are 360 questions in total, some of them you won't get right. And so when we're preparing students on our platform, we encourage them to get used to the idea that there's going to be a certain amount of questions that they won't be successful with, but to focus on the fact that provided they can achieve an overall pass mark that's strong enough, they will pass. So it's all about preparation. It's all about being systematic. And I think in the lead up, it's all about devoting time. Our courses vary in length. Our SQE1 course that's the longest is 40 weeks and it requires 10 hours of study per week. And again, you've got to make sure you give that study the right amount of time. When the SQE was first introduced, some people thought it was going to be quite easy, or at least the fact that it was MCQs gave, I think, a false sense of confidence. But now I think people have realized that it's a tough test and it needs full and proper preparation. And then finally, just on SQE2, SQE2 is a skills test, 16 assessments testing different types of legal skill, from legal research and writing through to advocacy and interviewing. And again, it's a tough test. It's over a period of several days, and it requires the same kind of intense and careful and thoughtful preparation. It also rolls in law from SQE1 as well, which is key. So again, our preparation is all about making sure students are prepared for the test in all its aspects. So I think preparation is everything. Don't underestimate the task. Try and prepare yourself mentally, because it is psychologically challenging as well as intellectually challenging, but with the right preparation and with the right support, it is achievable. Just lastly, Lloyd, I've put in the chat to you, and if you could perhaps copy and paste that to other students, some of the tools that we offer for free for our students. So we've got a set of 100 practice questions that you can do for free called SQE Edge. We also have a career hub that's got free advice on SQE and the route into practice. We're not going to talk so much about qualifying work experience today, but there may be 1 or 2 questions about that as well, which is the next stage. But that's some early reflection. So I think, to sum up, it's all about preparation. It's all about making sure you've thought about your process, and it's all about making sure you kind of create the right mindset when going to the test and make sure that you've studied in a way that's effective.
Brilliant. Thank you, Chris. That's great, and I will share that resource. The room is failing me here. I'm getting ever less visible. I've tried the light and it doesn't work, and I'm not prepared to leave the room, and yeah, for obvious reasons. So Chris, we'll be hearing more from about SQE2 from Neeta and from Tara. So, but that's a nice nice lead into that. Sticking with SQE1 for the moment, I want to bring in a very special guest that we've got joining us this afternoon, Judge Brendan Greiner. Brendan joins us from Iowa, across the pond. He's a district associate judge for the state of Iowa. Was appointed to the district court in 2018. Previously served 11 years as an assistant county attorney in Polk and Story, specializing in vehicular homicides and white collar offences. Brendan, the audience will be wondering, what have you got to do with SQE, being an esteemed judge over in the States? So let me hand you the floor for your reflections, please.
Well, esteemed is a bit too much of than I deserve, but thank you for that introduction. That's quite lovely. I question myself why I took SQE1 and qualify as a solicitor, and many of my colleagues asked that question too. Honestly, it was about curiosity more than anything. I wanted to see if I could sit for a bar exam in another country and see if I could qualify and see what I could learn along the way. And the process of studying for SQE1 was, for me, quite enjoyable. I don't know say that, but it was challenging for me to learn about the law in a completely different way than I am accustomed to. And so I found the process enjoyable. I took the 40-week BARBRI course. I was familiar with BARBRI because when I first qualified as a lawyer in Iowa in 2007, I took the BARBRI course then. So I was familiar with it, but back then it was an in-person course, but I was also successful with using BARBRI. So that's what I did again this time. The 40-week course was great for my career. I was able to study every morning or during the lunch hour, and I could usually get in about an hour and a half a day, which worked out perfectly. And I looked forward to studying for the exam, which I didn't think that I would, but it turned into something where I liked setting aside what I was doing for the day and then turning to learning the laws of England and Wales. So that was quite fun, and much to my surprise, I passed because it was an incredibly difficult undertaking. I don't want to mince words about that. It was a difficult test, and it was a difficult process, but quite fun. I sat for the exam in January of 23. There were two testing centers in North America, one in Toronto and one in Manhattan. So I sat for the exam in Manhattan. I agree with Chris that what I think is interesting about it is that they don't quite prepare for the endurance that's involved with having to sit for 180 questions one day and then 180 questions the next. And you have to answer all of those questions in a short period of time. I don't remember the breakdown of the time, but I think it's 4 or 5 minutes per question.
I think it's actually more like 1.5 minutes per question.
My apologies. Thank you for that clarification. Yeah, the trauma has erased that part of it from my exam, or from my brain, excuse me. It was difficult, 1.5 minutes per question, and having to do that over and over and over again. And by question number 30, you realize that you're reading the question again, and you're just so tired from the previous questions that you've read it, and then you look at it and say, I have no idea what this question is asking. That is something that you just need to mentally prepare for. Now, in preparation for the exam, I, of course, did the 40-week course, but I took off work for 2 weeks prior to the exam and did a whole bunch of practice tests. And the important part about a practice test is to take it and then look at all the questions that you got wrong, review why you got those questions wrong, and then take the test again, and then take it again. And so I took, I think, the BARBRI practice questions or practice tests 3 times. And I learned that that was helpful, and I got my score up to about 70% in my practice exams. But then when I actually took the test, it was nowhere near 70%. So just prepare yourself for that, that if you are scoring well during your practice exams, that's great. And it means that you're learning the material. In reality, your test score will probably be quite lower. So, but all in all, it was a positive experience, and one that I would absolutely repeat.
There you go. Thank you, Brendan. There's not many people, I imagine, that have done the SQE one for funsies. So it's a remarkable. I'm sure there's utility in it for you in terms of dual qualification as well. But a really interesting intellectual challenge to set yourself. And I'm sure lots of law students listening to this will be hearing a very different dynamic in terms of how you go about taking your assessments. Right? So here we're talking about getting a grade point average up, training for time, and getting to a certain mark, which for LLB students, doing various essay or problem-based assessments or sitting a different type of exam, that will be a very unfamiliar concept. So it's important that that message gets out. Chris, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of agree with that, that I think that is one of the other challenges. It is very different to any exam you'll have sat before. And 2 other quick things. In terms of the law, it will be a combination, or it is a combination of black letter kind of doctrinal law and practice law. Roughly half or a third of the course is practice law that you're unlikely to have studied on a traditional degree program. Obviously, you do study on the MSc, which is a really great reinforcement. I think the other thing just to mention is that a big difference is that it doesn't test the detail of cases. It doesn't test the detail of statutes. It's all about legal principle. And again, that very principle focus is somewhat unusual to some students. So again, it's very different, and you need special consideration for it.
Thanks, Chris. Okay, so I'm going to hand over to Tara now. Let me introduce Tara more fully to you. So Tara is a trainee solicitor at Tuckers Solicitors, and began working in law as a business administration apprentice in 2016 when she was 19. Went to the University of Kent, studied LLB, graduated, and actually the first part of your vocational route, Tara, was the LPC, the good old LPC, which is in transition, but very much, as I understand, the market has already moved to SQE from LPC. So I did my LPC a long time ago too. Tara has worked in firms throughout her studies, so it's really going to be a really interesting perspective from Tara about balancing practice and study. And you've just heard a perspective from Brendan as well in that sense, and how he tackled that. She's experienced working in commercial and residential conveyancing, private client, and is currently training in criminal defence work. Tara, the floor is yours, please, for your reflections and your experiences. Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, everyone, and thank you for the introduction. As Lloyd said, I was an LPC graduate. I graduated from the LPC in 2023, and pretty much immediately went on to study the SQE 2. Because I studied the LPC, that meant I was exempt from SQE 1. So that is one thing that is quite handy with doing the LPC first. The only bad news is that it meant I have to teach myself all of the law in the SQE 1, so it didn't really help me out too much. With regards to like doing the SQE 2, it is the more the skills set that you're taking the law that you learn in SQE 1 and then you're putting that into practice in SQE 2 and showing that the legal knowledge that you've learned you can now apply to a client's case. I will say that from having the professional experience that I had working in different law firms and in different areas of law, this really helped me with learning how to apply the knowledge to the skills for SQE 2. And it helped that 3 of the areas of law that I have worked in are actually examined in SQE 2. So I already had some sort of skill-based knowledge of those areas, because the amount of legal knowledge that you study in SQE 1, you don't study as much in SQE 2. You cover 5 areas. So you'll do business, property, probate, civil litigation, and criminal litigation. And you will be assessed on those areas in 16 exams, but you're assessed in 5 skill sets. So you do legal writing, legal drafting, legal research, case and matter analysis, and interview and attendance note. Now, interview and attendance note is technically in 2 parts. So you do the interview first and then the attendance note, and you're marked separately for both, but it classes as one exam. And there'll be some areas of law that you'll be tested in all of those exams and some not necessarily. So the written exams could be assessed in any of the 5 areas, and the oral exams, so the interview and attendance note, and advocacy, I forgot advocacy. Obviously, because of the trauma of advocacy, I've pushed that all the way out of my brain. Yes, you're assessed in advocacy as well. So the oral ones you'll only do in civil and criminal litigation, so you don't necessarily have to worry about the other areas of law for those ones. The exams are assessed over 5 half days. So you'll do 4 written exams a day in a half day. So they're generally 9 AM to 1 PM. And the oral exams, you do 2 a day. And generally, you're either given a morning slot or an afternoon slot. I don't know whether that's changed, because I know they've changed some little bits in the exam since I'd done it last year. I did fail my exams. I'm not afraid to admit that I did fail. I failed by 7%, which is nothing in comparison, really. It's such a small amount. And I am currently studying again to retake the exams in January. So as much as like some people, that could be quite a hit for some people, I accept it and I'm happy to promote it and talk about it. They are very hard exams. Obviously, I've worked in law for 8 years now, and even I struggled and I found it quite difficult to get my head around. But when you do get your results for the exams, they break absolutely everything down for you. So you can see pretty much exactly which areas you've passed or failed in, which marks you get. So for the 16 exams, you're marked 6 times. So for each area, the skill set and the legal knowledge, you get a mark for, I think it's between 1 and 6. And then they take the average of those marks and that will be your mark for that exam. And then they add all the 16 marks together, total them, and that's your mark for the whole exam. So I think for my skill set, when I took the exams, I took them in April and May earlier this year, and the pass mark that you had to get was 64% or 61%. But it was around that mark. But yeah, I think that's pretty much all I really have to say about the SQE2. The course that I took with BARBRI sets it out very well. When you get the online portal, you get essentially like a to-do list every week of explanation videos, tasks to do. They have SPAs and PFAs. Some of them are self-assessed, some of them are marked by tutors, and you can use that to test your knowledge. And you also have textbook reading as well. So everything is pretty much set out for you. The only top tip I would really have as someone that has worked and studied for the last God knows how many years is to be as organized as you can. And as soon as you get your portal open on day one, you want to make sure that you've booked all of your classes, you've noted all of your dates down, you've got your Zoom links ready, and you know exactly where you're supposed to be at each time. Because when you first start and you're bombarded with dates of classes and mocks and PFAs, it's really important to make sure that you don't miss any of them, especially, as I'm sure Chris will pick up on this as well. If you do the course with BARBRI and you complete 70% of it, if you do fail like me, you will automatically be given a guarantee to take the course again for free. So that is what I'm doing now.
Brilliant. Thank you, Tara. I mean, what a valuable message you've just given to our cohort, that someone, you know, actually facing clients and practicing this law applied to the skills, you know, metrics that are tested in SQE2, that, you know, just that what it takes to actually get through it, I think is right there to see. So an incredibly brave thing to do as well, to say in a public event that you failed. And I don't like the word failed for SQE, but I prefer not pass this time, because the fail rates, or the not pass this time rates, are between 45 and 59% or something. Chris will have the latest data to hand. But so thank you very much, Tara. That's a great message. Neeta. I met Neeta earlier on this year, and Neeta gave me her. I'm sorry, I'm in this cave, and the sleeve's not going to be very visible. Gave me a copy of her excellent book, which is called Skillfully Passing the SQE, which makes Neeta eminently qualified to give us some reflections on how to get through SQE and what it's really like. I had the pleasure of doing a book review of this. In one word, great. But let me introduce you more formally to Neeta. So Neeta owns a business called New Heights Training. The focus is on working with people on their communication skills and legal skills using the psychology of human behavior, emotional intelligence, and language patterns. This complements her workshops as an artist, where she helps people unlock their creativity and discover their potential untapped talent. Neeta coaches and trains hundreds of international lawyers, business professionals, aspiring solicitors, and students worldwide to prepare them for the SQE. All those concepts, Neeta, psychology, wider thinking, broad communication skills, flexible communication skills, these are real buzzwords that we hear in the sector, you know, and I think, you know, that's a great direction of travel. I'm sure it's the same over the pond, Brendan, in the legal sector at your end there. So Neeta, lots to unpack there. I'm going to give you the floor for some reflections and any tips as you see fit. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. And thank you, and hello and welcome, and, you know, good afternoon to everybody. I am a solicitor. I do have this business which has this creative side and this cognitive side of the way that I work. And we're not here to discuss the art today, which is the creative world that I live in, but the cognitive world really does encompass and is embedded in the coaching and training that I do, as Lloyd mentioned, incorporating the psychology of human behavior, language patterns, and emotional intelligence. So I'm a practitioner in all of these areas. And when you embed all of that into the training that I would love to see more and more. I'm seeing it sort of like creep in with law schools now, but you do need to have the practitioners that are skilled enough to be able to teach it. So it's not necessarily the old school communication skills that we would have done in our LPC days, but it's slightly more cutting edge, it's slightly more sophisticated. And so I use all of that in my coaching and training. I work using that for lawyers in the legal profession, but also other industry professions as well. So as Lloyd mentioned, I am the first published author on the SQE book, Skillfully Passing the SQE. And I use the word skillfully purposefully, because what I found is that the SQE is based on what was known as the QLTS, and that was an exam international lawyers had to do to pass. So it's very niche. And the SQE is very, very heavily based on that. So as I was plodding along, coaching and training these international lawyers, and I worked with anyone and everyone who was a qualified lawyer from 6 of the 7 continents. So I was working with people from different cultures, different backgrounds, different levels of experience, different status, you know, and what I realized was all of them, regardless of experience, were making the same common mistakes, making the same common sort of like, you know, template mistakes, experiencing the same challenges. And so I realized very quickly that this isn't specific to one culture or one particular type of level of experience. So my book came about because I embed all of the training that I've been, so that underpins my coaching and training business. And I got a publishing deal with Bloomsbury. We all took a gamble on this book because it came out before the SQE even started. So I was that confident. I understood exactly what it entailed, exactly what was required for the parts of the SQE Part 1 and Part 2. It's not an academic textbook, okay? It complements companies like BARBRI and other training providers and universities who provide you with the academic materials to study and prepare for this rigorous exam. And I come at it from a slightly more practical perspective. So it complements rather than sort of like provides and teaches you the law. So I like to make that very, very clear. It effectively helps and works for anyone regardless, like I say, of their background. And it really is focusing on the practicalities. A review by Christina Blacklaws, the past president of the Law Society, really the 2 words encapsulated it so well. And she said it's relentlessly practical. And I thought, you know, that's the key. It really, really will help you think about how to approach the MCQs, which is the first part, the knowledge part. But then it's the second part where you actually need to really focus on understanding not just the knowledge, but how you're going to deliver and perform. So it's very much about the do's and don'ts, the typical common challenges you might experience in any of the assessments, and how to overcome them. So it's very solutions orientated. So in terms of my experience with the SQE, I can say wholeheartedly that it extends beyond that because I haven't changed the way that I coach and work with a lot of the lawyers that I still work with. I still use the same formulas, the same format. It's all to the same standard of the SQE because the QLTS was the same standard. They haven't changed the marking criteria or the moderation criteria in relation to that. So I focus primarily on SQE Part 2, client interviewing, advocacy, and little bits of legal writing to understand and help people, you know, really shape their legal writing to the tone of what they're expecting. I'm not a law school and I'm not a competitor to law schools. I actually, rather than compete, I sort of like collaborate. I work with a number of them and I work with them from a perspective of actually offering something slightly more tailored. That's not to say what law schools are doing is not enough, but some people actually just need that guidance and support at a much more tailored level. So that's where I come at it. And I've been doing it, like I say, for so many years now that I'm yet to come across somebody that I'm not able to really necessarily help in a very tailored way. So the book that I've written, this book, is the 2nd edition now that came out in November. I'm very, very proud of it. It's done really, really well. And you know, it's quite daunting to be able to put into writing something that you're doing very nuanced, very in the moment with somebody because it's so tailored. And so I felt that being able to offer it to everybody, it's nice. But then I thought I need to be able to have something to allow people to come back with feedback on it, to be able to say, Neeta, this bit doesn't really work. I don't understand what you mean by it. And as a result of that, when I wrote the book and it got published, I set up on LinkedIn an SQE success group, which is purely to help people, you know, with the SQE. It came out, like I said, before it started. People are a little bit more familiar with it now, but there is still a whole sea of information that is quite confusing for a lot of people. So it's very much a group to support people, to provide insight, tips and tricks, and not just me being an expert in the area to be able to share my knowledge, but actually learn from others who are equally able to share, you know, insights and their experiences. So I love the fact that with the book, you sort of like, I get to bring to life, you know, in that group, what I've written about in the book. So there's that aspect of it in terms of the experience of the SQE. It is difficult. It is challenging. We've heard today from everybody. There's no reason why it shouldn't be. You know, it's one of the most prestigious professions to be a part of worldwide, and it is respected in that way. So what we also have to understand in terms of reflecting on skills is that law is a people business. And what that really means is that even in the fast pace of our way the landscape is changing with AI, there is always going to be a need for human interaction in law. And it's interesting because back pre-COVID, I was invited to speak at The Hague on the future lawyer. And I was surrounded by tech people, you know, talking about the advancements of AI, generative AI, and how that's going to have an interplay with law. And so back then compared to now, what I'm seeing and the fast pace that it's all changing at is incredible. But I was at an AI conference 2 weeks ago, and exactly what I heard there is what I'm going to say. And that is AI won't replace humans, but humans using AI will replace humans who don't. And so there's always going to be a need for skills. It's just a question of having an agile way of approaching it and recognizing that actually we need to be able to embrace AI rather than fear it. And so what key tips could I really offer anybody who's thinking about embarking on the SQE? Really, we've had Chris explain, you know, at some detail what it involves, and it is one exam. It is a centralized exam, but it is in 2 parts. And the first part really is focusing on your knowledge through multiple choice. And either you are correct or incorrect. It's really as simple as that. On some levels, you know the law or you don't. And, you know, and you have to pass part 1 to get on to part 2. So part 2, though, really, that is where you have to start thinking it's 50-50 now. You know, it really is about the law and the skills. You know, don't underestimate the skills. Don't neglect the skills, or you do that really at your peril. They can be the tipping point sometimes. And the fact that the SRA have equally marked the law and the skills should give you an indication of how important they really are, you know, for not just passing the SQE, but actually life in practice as a solicitor. So the second tip that I would like to share with you is that most people are very comfortable studying the law, the black letter of the law, or even the procedural subjects like the LPC. I like to say the SQE is really like a squashed up LLB substantive subjects and the LPC combined in one, all front uploaded. And so the law is tangible. You can really marker and check yourself against how well you are doing. But the skills, they could be frustrating because they're intangible, and so more difficult, more nuanced. And so some skills will come to you more easily, and some you will really have to work much harder at, and they will take time. Unfortunately, you can't cram them. So a tip that I do often share when you are practicing client interviewing or practicing advocacy is to record yourself, because when you look back from, you know, attempt 1 to attempt 10, you will see the physical difference. And the third thing that I really want to leave you with is that the SQE exam really is tough. Okay, but there is plenty of support out there. There are plenty of forums, you know, WhatsApp groups, study groups. The LinkedIn SQE success group that I set up was a support group really for people who didn't know anything about the SQE, or to really cover my own back also when I wrote the book, thinking, God, if someone's got some questions about it, how are they going to get in touch with me? So it really allowed people to have this platform to be able to share. And so it can be an isolating experience for many people, but see the SQE as a journey. And by that, I mean really embrace the highs and lows of it, because it's not the end goal, the SQE. Once you pass it, it's like the stepping stones to qualification. And if you've got the right skill set in place, which is what I hope to be able to help people achieve for the SQE, then that can only serve you really well in practice and make life that little bit more enjoyable, even when times get tough in practice. So thank you very much for listening to what I have to say about the SQE, and I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Neeta. And we've got 15 minutes left on the clock here. There is a Q&A function which I've got open, so do submit questions if you have questions for the panel. I might throw this one out to all of you, because you'll have different perspectives on this. But I guess one of the things that the LPC route sort of gave as an opportunity is a suite of electives, which sort of had this idea of facing what the professions really wanted from the postgraduates, and so someone taking SQE1, is the SQE1 testing, or combined with the SQE2, the kind of skills that the profession needs? We've had some insight into that across the panel already, but if the answer to that is somewhat no, where can students in their journey towards SQE pick up those other skills that might be missing from an SQE preparation program? And I say program rather than course. So I don't know if anyone wants to take first dibs on that. Chris?
It's a really good point, Lloyd. I mean, I think just on the question of does the SQE itself cover a sufficient range of subject areas and skills, I think it does, in the sense that it certainly covers those core skills. As Tara said, the SQE2 exam does actually sort of test quite a broad range of skills, but equally, and certainly the 16 or so knowledge areas of SQE1 cover a pretty broad spectrum. But there is much more to being a lawyer and to specialist practice than those skill sets. And in fact, you've given me a great segue, Lloyd. We've just launched at BARBRI a new set of online courses called Legal Life Skills. Our legal life skills courses are a combination of courses on specialist law, so sort of financial law and banking and that sort of area, and also specialist skills like management skills, communication skills, and other things that would be tested on a more specialist program. So I think, yeah, there are opportunities. We provide them at BARBRI. Other opportunities are out there as well for gaining those additional skills, which I think is right. But there's certainly plenty of coverage in SQE, but for sure, there are other things out there. Having said that, I don't think any student should feel they need to know everything when they go into their law firm, because your law firm will train you, and the specialist areas that it requires you to undertake, it will kind of take you through those and may even provide specialist training of its own. So, it's great to equip yourselves with extra skills and knowledge bases, but don't feel you have to know everything on day one. Focus on the SQE, get that nailed down, do some extra study if you can, but equally, there is a lifetime to learn. Perhaps I'll sum it up that way.
Oh, I love that message, Chris. That's a really, great message. Brendan?
I think one of the most important skills that preparing for SQE can give you is the idea of working in a pressure cooker, where you have to come up with an answer to a problem under very strict guidelines, where there's a lot of pressure, and come up with the right answer, and how you deal with that emotionally and physically too, to overcome that. And that's the skill that is very important to being a lawyer. It's not as substantive, as you would say, as the law. That can you take the law and apply it in a condensed fashion and do so under a lot of pressure.
Yeah, I think that pressure is very much a facet of life in practice. So it's a good point, well made, Brendan. Neeta, do you want to
Sorry,
come
I
in?
just want to, exactly, it's just following on from what everyone said, is everybody that I've worked with pre even SQE, and like I say, the standard and the format is still the same. Time management is essential in terms of, yes, you need to know the law and you have the skills to be able to do a quick 30-minute legal writing assessment or a 60-minute case and matter analysis or even a research paper, but it's the management of your time that can actually impact whether you pass or fail that assessment. So I think that is one of the things that I think I've picked up, you know, from my sort of like feedback that I'm hearing and working with people, that time is of the essence really for every single part of the SQE, whether that's 1 or 2, regardless of the different types of assessments within it.
Thank you, Neeta. Tara.
I think just to add on to what everyone has said, obviously I started working in law when I was 19. I hadn't been to uni yet. I had only just completed my A-levels in law, which is the very basic foundations of law in England and Wales. And a lot of what I have learnt through going through my undergrad, the LPC and the SQE, you never stop learning as a solicitor. Not the moment you qualify, that's not it. You don't just qualify and know absolutely everything you're ever going to know in your career. Solicitors have to do a set amount of training called CPD every year anyway, because the law is constantly evolving. So you're constantly having to learn almost every day how to do your job. And I feel as well, just from the amount of firms that I've worked in while studying at the same time, there are some things that you will need in your day-to-day work that can never be taught in a course. Even just things like office etiquette and how to be in an office full of people, open plan, or how to handle emotional clients on the phone. You're never going to learn how to handle all of that by taking a course. And that's just something that you pick up every day just by working in the industry.
Yeah, great point. Chris, you've got your hand up again. So
yeah, just to echo what's been said. I mean, I think, you know, we've seen real resilience in evidence today, and that resilience is the kind of skill that you can't teach, or at least is one that takes a lifetime. And something else I was just going to say about SQE1 is that I think one interesting thing about the way that SQE1 blends all the subject areas is I think it's really good preparation for the ability to be agile in your thinking, because as a lawyer, problems don't come in boxes. You don't get a client come in and say, I've got a tort problem or I've got a contract problem. They come in with complex problems. And I think the SQE, for all its challenges, at least does prepare you for that complexity that is life.
Oh, yes. Thank you, Chris. Great point. So we do have a question on the Q&A. Is there any shortcut to qualification if you have already completed both an LLB and an LLM abroad, or have work experience? Now, I know there's some stuff in your book on this, Neeta, not to put you on the spot. I'm sure Chris has the update on that as well.
There's often a lot of sort of like language used about exemptions, and the only people that can be exempt from the SQE are those that are qualified solicitors or qualified lawyers. Let's say not solicitors, qualified lawyers. So when you've done the LPC, it's not necessarily an exemption, it's just language, but it is the equivalent means which allows you to move directly onto SQE2. So if somebody's done international qualifications abroad, unless they are a qualified lawyer in that jurisdiction, having done the long route, if you like, then they might well be exempt from SQE Part 2, possibly Part 1 as well. But I think you're probably better off doing the exam than trying to apply for the exemption for Part 1. I've heard that's how difficult it is. But that's the long and short of it, that unless you are already a qualified lawyer, in which case you can apply for an exemption, anybody else would have to complete one or both parts. Does that answer the question?
So, certainly, as far as I'm aware, yeah. So thank you for that. Tara, can I come to you and ask, as someone who's now preparing for the SQE2 exam whilst working. How do you manage your time? I'd like students to understand, you know, what it looks like to be facing a professional exam whilst, you know, juggling a major commitment like a full-time job or care commitments, those kind of thing.
It is hard. I think that's the long and short of it. I also work 2 jobs, which doesn't help at all because I also work for the Kent Law Society alongside my job at Tuckers. So I make life as difficult for myself as I possibly can. It is mainly about discipline and setting yourself a study schedule as early as possible. So obviously I'd already taken the SQE2 once. So by the time I came round to logging into the portal again on day 1 of starting it again, I already kind of had an idea in mind of how much time I needed to give myself each week to get the studying done. Obviously, I can't speak on behalf of SQE1, but I know for the portal in SQE2, they give you a rough time scale of how long it's going to complete each task in the to-do list for each week. So to give you an idea, textbook reading, they allow 2 to 3 hours, and explanation video, they give about an hour. Now, when you actually watch an explanation video, they're about 25 minutes long. So they give you an additional 5 minutes to make notes or to rewind or something like that. So a lot of my day, I split into blocks. So obviously I've got a 9 to 5 block, which will be my work for Tuckers. Depending on what time I wake up in the morning, I might have a block in the morning before 9 o'clock that could be a study block. So if I know I've got an hour between like 8 and 9, I know that I have an hour I could do an explanation video, or I could do an assessment task. I also have time in the evenings, so from 5 o'clock onwards, I can have another study block. And I think that's the way you sort of have to look at your day, even when you're working, being able to arrange client meetings and tasks and drafting when you're a qualified solicitor, again, is all just working in blocks. So it is just a case of being as disciplined as you can. And if you know that you're coming to the end of your week and you've still got stuff to do on your weekly schedule for BARBRI, but your clients, your friends want you to go out on a social event, it's a case of, do you risk going out or do you want to be on top of your studies? And it's you're always going to come up with things like that. I've been studying and working for a very long time, and some points I've been behind and some points I've been on top. It's all about self-discipline and knowing what you want to achieve.
Great message. Thank you, Tara. Aya on the chat, on the Q&A, I should say, sorry, says, I've just started my LLM and wanted to get an idea of what the path from here to SQE looks like. Could you give me an idea? Chris, you nodded inadvertently or consciously there, so I'm going to pick on you for this one because we're getting short of time.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, and you're doing the LLM, so I'm presuming you've done an LLB. The point is the pathway is really the same for you as for other students, in the sense that you need to now think about timing for when you want to take SQE1, and then obviously that will then lead later on to SQE2. So I think, as we said at the beginning, currently SQE1 has 2 sittings. There's one in July, one in January. And our courses run kind of backwards from those sittings. So if you're going to, so you're on an LLM now, let's say you graduate next August, you could then start a course aiming for the January 2026 SQE1 exam. That would probably be a sensible way to do it. And then you could plan your timescale after that. So it's a question of just sequencing now. I'd advise everybody, if you haven't started looking at the SRA website and becoming a diligent scrutineer of that, then start doing that, because one of the things I was going to say at the start, one of the biggest challenges people find with both the SQE1 and the SQE2 is actually booking onto it. The administration involved in getting yourself a place at a test centre near you for both of those exams can be very, very challenging in its own right, and you don't need that additional stress on top of studying. So I would advise all students to really just make the SRA website your friend, start to learn the dates of the exams. Obviously, you can look at BARBRI for our courses as to when they start as well, and then start to match the things up and get your ducks in a row.
Excellent. Yeah, I saw all the panelists nodding there when you said that. Brendan, I'm going to come to you for a quick fire. What's harder, the SQE1 or one of the US bar exams?
Well, I've only taken one US bar exam. So that was an incredibly difficult test. SQE 1 difficult. In part because of the language. The language that is that is used would sometimes throw me off. Plus, I didn't have to know tax or solicitors' accounts, both of which were my the subjects for which I struggled the most. So I'm going to say SQE 1.
It was perhaps an unfair question for you to ask, but yeah, thanks, Brendan. Okay, we're 2 minutes out, so I just want to wrap up by asking the panel. We've heard some really important words today. A single word for the skill that it takes to pass the SQE. That's put you all on the spot. Who wants to go first?
Resilience.
Resilience. Thanks, Neeta.
Determination.
And
Endurance.
on a similar theme, I'm going to say commitment.
Okay, well, therein lies the challenge. But again, we've also heard words enjoyment, satisfaction, achievement. So there's a quid pro quo there as well. Good luck to everyone facing the SQE. Tara, good luck with SQE2 next time around. Just want to plug a couple of things, if I may. The next Future of Legal Practice series, which is our other at the PLI other event series, and that's on the 14th of November here at King's at Bush House. And that's going to be on class actions with Greg Rowan, who's a partner at HSF. You're very welcome to attend. Brendan, I'm not sure we can pay for your flight, but you are very much welcome here for that. The next virtual coffee house, I'm thrilled to say, I'm going to co-chair with one of our PLI students. Today's session was what's the SQE really like? The session we're going to hold in January with some KCL alumni is what's paralegaling really like? What is paralegaling really like? So there's some messaging to come on that front. So do join us for that and watch out for the invites. I just want to say sorry to my wonderful colleague Shauna in events because I appear to have mucked around with her link to my own detriment and hopefully no one else's in terms of getting into the room late. So thank you, Shauna, for setting all of this up and for rescuing me at the start. And thank you very sincerely to the panel, to Chris, to Tara, to Brendan and to Neeta. I'll hopefully host this recording and I will share your links from the chat. Good afternoon to everyone. Good morning to Brendan, and I'll see you next time.
Thank you, everyone.